All right, so now that we have watched the course overview video and kind of what we're going to be doing this summer, let's go ahead and discuss the content of the course. So most of the content of the course will pertain to government accounting. Although the course title is government and not-for-profit, the not-for-profit portion of the class is really relegated to one chapter, maybe two chapters near the end of the class. However, if that is the content you're interested in seeing, don't worry, there is an associated not-for-profit. We'll shorten that to NFP for most of the semester. So there is an NFP proposal presentation that you must complete for this course. Most students in the past enjoy this presentation. It's kind of a proposal. It's we'll get into it in more detail in a few weeks, but it's more, hey, I think this thing would be an interesting thing to do. How do we raise capital for it? Oh, we've got to make a proposal. And that's kind of what the project is. So also, the government and NFP accounting are pretty similar. The biggest difference is largely in the restrictions that are placed on funds within a not-for-profit entity. Okay, so one of the things you should know going into the course is that it is different. Okay, typically in my seated sections, I ask how many students are taking the course because they thought it would be easier than taking like Tax 2 or Cost 2 or something like that. And about half the class is usually in that group. Half or more usually raise their hand because they think this is going to be an easier course. The other half of the group or less is students that are taking the course because they're actually interested in learning more about government and not-for-profit accounting. I really do love government and not-for-profit accounting. I think it is so different than what we typically look at when we think about for-profit accounting. Your CPA firms, things like that, your internal audit. It's so different and so interesting, and it really is impactful. I always tell my students, I really think that government accounting is the most important type of accounting. It's the one that everybody should understand, because don't you want the people that are handling your money to be accountable for it? Right? Don't you want to know what your city, what your municipality, your village, wherever you happen to live, is doing with your money, what your university is doing with your money? Those are all under the umbrella of government accounting. So it really is very important. It's not Warren Buffett's money. If he has a bad day on the stock market, he's not worrying about paying his utility bill next month. But you might be, I might be. You know what I mean? So this is really very, very important accounting. Now that I've went off on a tangent, we'll talk about that later. There really are two significant differences in the content of this course, but they really do boil down to one thing, and that is perspective. So typically in our accounting courses, we focus on for-profit entities that are trying to, increase owners or shareholders' wealth. These entities, they're generally focused on generating positive returns, generating profit. You don't want to see a net loss, things like that. But in the government and not-for-profit or the NFP sector, we're not concerned about the profit or the returns. What we are concerned with is the efficient and proper use of the funds or monies generated by or donated to the entity. Okay? That's what's important to us. That is the fundamental difference between what you've learned throughout your academic career and what we're going to discuss in this course in particular. So let's move on and discuss the breakdowns of each chapter so that you kind of know where we're headed throughout the term. Actually, you know what? Let me take a step back and we'll go over the rest of this slide. I didn't really hit it word for word. I typically try not to, but these are just some of the things we're going to do. We're going to prepare financial statements for government and NFP organizations that are not generating a profit. So that's going to be different for you. You're going to feel uncomfortable when you see a net loss more commonly. You got to remember, these are operations. These are programs that are set up to help people. They are not revenue generating businesses. Okay, so when you see that net loss, it's okay. You're supposed to, I'll use this example again later in the semester, but if you recall, a couple of years ago, we had a president that was really upset that the United States Postal Service was not turning a profit. For some reason, he did not understand that that is a service, that is not a revenue. It's not supposed to be turning a profit, right? It's a service we provide to people as a government. So think of it in that perspective, right? So this means that particularly with government entities, we're going to be using a new type of accounting. It's called modified accrual accounting. The big difference here is we are worried about current only. We're only going to talk about current things. We'll talk about that in Chapter 1. We're going to hit modified accrual so you know what it is in Chapter 1. We'll also use full accrual accounting towards the end. It's what you're used to, right? The full accrual accounting is what you've done in 301, 302, 604, all your other accounting classes. You've used full accrual accounting. And we'll use those to prepare your government-wide statements at the end. So you'll see there's a hierarchy. We do fund statements, fund level statements, and then we'll work our way up to government-wide statements, which are more akin to the typical financial statements that we see in a for-profit entity. So we will use full accrual as well. And believe me, the relief that I see on students' faces in the seated class when we finally get back to full accrual accounting is amazing. You would laugh at yourselves if you knew how relieved you're going to be doing full accrual accounting again. It really is funny. It is very, you guys are very much accountants. It makes me laugh every time I see it. So we're also going to be learning the following new cool things. We'll learn some new general ledger accounts, mostly titles. A lot of times these general ledger accounts, they function in the same way that you see in full accrual accounting or in your for-profit classes. We just give them new names, right? We have to be a little more descriptive because we don't want to do what we call commingling of funds. We don't want to take funds from the water utility fund and mix it in with the fire department fund. We're not allowed to do that in government accounting. So we give them new fund names. You'll also learn some new financial statements. They are basically your regular financial statements that you are used to, your income statement, your balance sheet. You'll be excited to know we very, very, very rarely use a statement of cash flows in this class. We will talk about it, but we're not going to break them down too heavily. What we will focus on is your changes in operations. So your basically your income statement. That's going to be your expenditures and revenues. That'll be your income statement, and then we'll also talk about our changes in net position, which, as most of you know, is basically your balance sheet. We will also talk about budget and encumbrance journal entries. These are the ones that I think are the most fun. What do we always, I always joke, what do we like to do as accountants? We love to allocate things. And we will be doing that with these budget and encumbrance journal entries. You can kind of think of these journal entries as paperweights. You just set it on top of a pile of cash and you say this is encumbered and cannot be used for anything except for this specific purpose. But they're a little backwards and weird, so we will get to those later in the semester. So now we'll talk about chapter breakdown now that I've rambled on and on and on again. Chapters 1 through 8 of the course are going to focus on state and local governments. Will not focus on federal governments much at all since they have completely different regulations, completely different types of oversight. However, if you are interested in federal government accounting, please feel free to read chapter 14 of the book. That is what goes into federal government accounting. Chapter 9 is going to discuss my area of expertise, which is the audit process for governmental entities. However, as great as I think this subject is, we'll not be discussing it at any kind of great depth. If you are interested in government and NFP audit, though, I would recommend giving the chapter a once-over. Also, if we have the time, we may do an extra credit assignment involving fraud and government if time permits. So don't count on that, but if we do have a little extra time, we will run through an extra credit assignment that deals specifically with fraud in the government. Chapter 10 is our not-for-profit or our NFP chapter. It focuses solely on NFP entities and their accounting procedures. While they are similar to government accounting, there are some pretty distinct differences, primarily in the area of restrictions of funds. Chapter 11 is the chapter that's going to focus on college and universities. These are entities that can either be NFP or government, so there's some interesting accounting in that chapter, though by that time in the semester you'll be used to this new type of accounting, this modified accrual that we deal with in this class, so it won't be much of a shock to your system at all. Finally, I really just kind of want to talk about expectations of this course. From my perspective as the instructor of this course, my largest expectation of you as grad students is that you're spending time each week reviewing and studying the material. I will lecture as though you were reading the textbook, which most of you should definitely be doing. The notes, you'll see the notes assignment that you fill out each week are much more helpful and honestly easier to complete if you're utilizing the textbook as a resource, okay? I often tell my 201 students that they should be using every resource available to them to help them achieve the grade that they're aiming for. And the textbook is one of the most helpful resources that you have. A lot of times I'm going to hit the high points of this, right? The textbook is going to give you the subtleties that you may be more interested in. I'm going to hit the things that I know are important that we've got to discuss, and then the book is going to go into a little more detail. Okay. I also expect that you're asking questions as they come up and you're working on assignments throughout the week. As I mentioned in the previous video, this is only an 8-week course, so you may sometimes feel as though we're flying through the material, but you need to be working on it pretty consistently. Especially during summer, I would assume for most of you this is the only course you are taking, besides maybe a 1 credit hour wine tasting course or something like that. So my expectation is that you are putting the effort into this course. All that brings me back to my next point. I'm not going to be accepting late work in this class. We just don't have the time for it. We simply have too much to cover in such a short period of time. I'm not going to be going back and retreading through old waters, so to speak, right? I'm not going to be going and looking at your chapter 1 homework when we're in chapter 8. Okay, just not going to do it. However, like I mentioned in that last video, if I make a mistake, I'll correct it. You'll not be punished for me screwing something up, right? That's on me. I'll fix it. That goes for the calendar, grades, projects, assignments, etc. If I send out a weird email that doesn't make any sense, I'll fix it. So just be aware of that. As far as your expectations go in this course, I would be prepared for the following: that you're going to have to put in a significant amount of time and effort in this course. You need to think of it as a new area of accounting. Okay? This is a completely new area of accounting. It is going to throw some of you for a loop. It does every semester. It throws some students way off track because they're expecting full accrual accounting and they're expecting this content to build on top of what they've already learned, and that's not really what's happening. This is building on top of a new pile of accounting that you are learning off to the side. Okay, so you've got to have an open mind with this class. You've got to, especially when we get to like encumbrance and budgeting, you've got to remember some of this we're doing backwards. It's backwards from what you think it would be. Sometimes we're going to credit when we should debit normally in full accrual. So you've got to have an open mind. And the last thing I'd ask of you is just remember, I'm here to help you, not make your life difficult. I know saying that, oh, we're not going to be turning in late work and all that sounds kind of like a jerky thing to say, but quite honestly, like I said, with this only being an 8-week course, we've got to just move forward. We've got to constantly be moving forward. But I'm here to help you. I'm not here to make your life more difficult. Okay? So after all that, it's finally time we're going to get started on chapter 1, right? This is where we're going to discuss what exactly is our government entity, what exactly is a government entity, and what sets them apart from what we typically discuss in your classes. So from here, you can move on to the chapter 1 content. Thanks, guys.